You can now take a hike in the water of beautiful Lake Tahoe. California state parks have developed Tahoe's first underwater trail. It's called the Emerald Bay State Park Maritime Heritage Trail, and it includes 4 different sites showcasing sunken historic boats.
Lake Tahoe looks exactly like a picture-perfect postcard with crystal blue water, pine-covered mountains, and remarkably clean air. Every summer, millions of tourists visit to swim, boat, and snap photos. But beneath that gorgeous, shimmering surface sits over 1,600 feet of dangerously dark water. Something deep down in that abyss has been quietly unsettling onlookers for a very long time. What did a research crew actually capture down there? And why did the operator kill the live feed the exact second it appeared on screen? Join us as we reveal the buried secrets of Lake Tahoe, the expedition that changed everything. It started out as the kind of beautiful morning that makes people completely forget how dangerous open water can be. It was early June, and the sun was just starting to clear the peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountains, casting long golden streaks of light across the vast surface of Lake Tahoe. The air was cold, and the kind of sharp chill that bites right through a jacket, even in the middle of summer, mostly because this lake sits at an elevation of over 6,200 feet above sea level. A small research crew had been out on the water since before sunrise, quietly setting up heavy equipment on a specialized vessel anchored just off Glenbrook Bay on the Nevada side. But they were not out there to enjoy the scenery. They were looking for something specific on the lake bed. The team had been meticulously planning this deep water expedition for weeks. Their main goal was to capture high-definition footage of the SS Tahoe, a legendary historic steamship that had been sitting on the bottom of the lake since 1940, completely untouched and mostly unseen by human eyes. To do this, they brought out a high-tech, remotely operated underwater vehicle, an ROV, loaded with advanced cameras, powerful sonar systems, and ultra-bright LED lights designed to cut through pitch-black water at extreme depths. They had done all their homework. They knew the exact coordinates of the wreck, and they honestly thought they knew what they were getting into. As it turns out, they were completely wrong about that last part. The heavy ROV was lowered into the water slowly. From the surface, Lake Tahoe looks almost unreal because the water is so staggeringly clear. On a perfectly calm morning, a person can look down and see rocks, fish, and sandy floor in the shallows like they are staring through a clean pane of glass. But that comforting clarity does not last forever. As the ROV descended past about 60 feet, natural light from the sun began to rapidly fade. By 150 feet, daylight was completely gone, and the live camera feed shifted over to the artificial glow of the ROV's onboard lights. Just a pale white cone of brightness cutting through absolute, crushing darkness. Meanwhile, the sonar system was steadily pinging. Down in the control room, the operator was watching 2 screens simultaneously. One showed sonar readings of the underwater terrain, and the other showed the live video feed of whatever the lights happened to hit. For a long time, there was absolutely nothing to see. Just endless sediment, random rocks, and the steep, muddy wall of the lake bed dropping sharply away into the dark. Then, suddenly, the sonar screen lit up. Something massive, something with a distinct, rigid structure. The operator maneuvered the ROV's thrusters and descended directly toward it. Right around 360 feet deep, the ghostly bow of the SS Tahoe finally drifted into the camera frame. For anyone who has never seen real footage of a deep freshwater shipwreck before, it is genuinely hard to describe how eerie it looks. This massive vessel had been sitting at the bottom of the lake for over 80 years, but it barely looked like it had aged a day. Because the deep water here is so cold and completely lacks oxygen, the ship was practically perfectly preserved. The wooden hull is entirely intact, the outline of the main deck perfectly recognizable, and the entire structure standing upright. A 169-foot steamship sitting on an underwater slope in total darkness, looking almost like it was quietly waiting for its crew to come back. The researchers watching the screens went completely silent. They immediately started filming, moving the ROV slowly along the hull to document details that had never been seen before. And everything was going better than they had ever expected. But then, right in the middle of that smooth descent, everything changed in a heartbeat. The sonar system suddenly picked up a second object, definitely not part of the ship. Something else entirely, sitting just a short distance away. The operator swung the ROV's camera toward the coordinates, and the powerful high beams caught a strange, massive shape moving through the water. That is exactly when the operator did something nobody saw coming. He did not pause. He did not back the ROV away. He reached over and completely cut the power to the machine. This was not a graceful shutdown procedure. He straight up killed the live feed. Instantly, every monitor in the control room went pitch black. The ROV went dead hundreds of feet below, left drifting blindly in the abyss while the panicked crew scrambled to pull the heavy cables back up manually. Nobody on the boat said a word. And when they finally dragged the dripping equipment back onto the deck, one of the primary team members was visibly shaking. Later, when tiny fragments of that final footage began to quietly leak online, mostly blurry still frames, and a few seconds of incredibly shaky video, people everywhere started asking the exact same question. What did those researchers actually see in that final second before the screen went dead? According to leaked accounts, whatever appeared in those high beams in that last moment was enough to make an experienced operator abandon thousands of dollars worth of equipment without a second thought. To even begin making sense of that mystery, one has to look closely at what this lake actually is. Because Lake Tahoe is not just an incredibly deep body of water, it is a place where the normal laws of nature seem to work completely differently. So, stay tuned as we delve into this, the deceptive beauty and scientific wonders of Lake Tahoe. When standing safely on the shore, Lake Tahoe looks like one of the most breathtaking, peaceful places in all of North America. It sits right on the border between California and Nevada, tucked high into the Sierra Nevada mountain range at an elevation of over 6,200 feet. The sheer scale is mind-boggling. It is 22 miles long, 12 miles wide, and the surface spans 191 square miles. The shoreline stretches 72 miles, and the lake holds roughly 39 trillion gallons of water, enough to cover the entire state of California under 14 inches of flooding. It is the largest alpine lake in North America and the second deepest lake in the entire United States, plunging down to a staggering 1,645 feet at its lowest known point. And then there is that legendary clarity. Scientists from UC Davis have been tracking it every year since 1968, using a tool called a Secchi disc, basically a plain white plastic disc lowered into the water on a marked rope until it disappears from sight. Back in the late 60s, that disc stayed visible all the way down to an unbelievable 102 feet. The most recent measurements put the average annual clarity at around 69 feet. But even so, it remains remarkable. Most ordinary lakes on Earth have clarity measured in single digits before everything disappears into murkiness. That deep, almost electric blue color is not just a trick of the light either. When sunlight hits the lake, red wavelengths get absorbed as they travel deeper. Blue wavelengths scatter back up to the surface. And because Tahoe is surrounded by hard granite mountains that do not release much dirt or nutrients, there is very little algae growth, and that makes that blue color unbelievably intense. But those exact same scientific traits that make the lake look so stunning from a distance are the very things that make its deepest zones so incredibly strange. Once below about 600 feet, no sunlight can penetrate the water. Total, unyielding darkness. And down there, the temperature locks in at a steady, freezing 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Every single day of the year, whether dead winter or the height of summer. That constant temperature has some seriously dark consequences. Near freezing water slows down the laws of biology. The bacteria that normally break down organic matter become sluggish and inactive, and decomposition runs at just a tiny fraction of its normal speed. When that freezing cold combines with the near-total lack of oxygen at the bottom, it creates the ultimate environment for preservation. Wood, metal, clothing, and yes, as people have accidentally discovered over the decades, human bodies can stay perfectly intact for generations. Scientists often call the bottom of the lake a giant natural refrigerator. But that term almost downplays how intense the environment really is. Lake Tahoe is also what geologists call a terminal lake. While dozens of mountain streams flow into it, it has only one tiny natural outlet, the Truckee River, which carries away just a fraction of the water. Because of this, scientists estimate that any drop of water entering Lake Tahoe stays trapped inside for roughly 650 years before it finally cycles out. That is not a calculation error. The very water seen from the shoreline today was sitting there before William Shakespeare was born. So if something sinks to the bottom of this lake, it does not drift away. It does not break apart. It stays exactly where it landed, frozen in the dark, for centuries. And when that specific scientific reality is understood, the things actually found down there become deeply unsettling. Documented history, shipwrecks, and tragedies. Long before the modern internet theories and commercial legends, there is a mountain of real, documented history around Lake Tahoe that is honestly strange enough on its own. The story starts with the original keepers of the land. The Washoe Native American tribe, who call themselves the Washoe, simply meaning the people, have lived along these shores for thousands of years. To them, this lake was not just a resource, it was the absolute spiritual center of their entire world. In their native language, they called it Da-Awaga, meaning the lake. They held deep reverence for a massive volcanic rock formation on the eastern shore known as Cave Rock, rising about 75 feet straight out of the water. The tribe's shamans traveled there for sacred rituals, and ordinary people gave it a very wide berth. The Washoe had a highly complex, cautious relationship with Tahoe, combining practical survivalist respect for the water's hidden dangers with a genuine spiritual fear of what they believed lived deep inside it. Everything changed in the 1840s and 1850s when European settlers arrived and completely transformed the landscape. Massive timber companies stripped the surrounding mountains of their ancient trees to reinforce the silver mines of the Comstock Lode in Nevada. Luxury hotels started popping up along the pristine shores, and by the 1880s, Lake Tahoe had officially become a playground for wealthy families from San Francisco. But there were no paved highways yet. So, to move passengers, cargo, and daily mail across the water, a massive fleet of commercial steamships went to work. And without a doubt, the most magnificent of those vessels was the SS Tahoe. She was officially launched on June 24, 1896, custom-built by the Union Iron Works out of San Francisco, 169 feet long, and powered by two massive wood-fired steam engines pumping out 1,200 horsepower, driving twin brass propellers to a top speed of 18.5 knots. The interior was pure luxury, fine teakwood and rich mahogany, hand-stitched leather upholstery, gleaming polished brass fixtures, and heavy velvet carpets. She could comfortably carry 200 of high society's wealthiest passengers at a time, and people affectionately called her the Queen of the Lake. For more than 40 years, the Queen ruled over Tahoe, but then the modern world caught up with her. In the mid-1930s, engineers finally completed the paved highway system wrapping around the rugged shoreline, and suddenly, a slow-moving steamship could not compete with a personal automobile. The commercial shipping business dried up, and the SS Tahoe was permanently retired. Then, in 1940, the ship's final owner decided to intentionally scuttle the vessel in the shallow waters off Glenbrook Bay. The idea being to create a tourist attraction where people could look down through glass-bottom boats at the beautiful ship resting just below the surface. It was a fantastic marketing idea, executed terribly. When they pulled the plugs and sank the SS Tahoe on August 29, 1940, they did not realize that the underwater slope at that spot was incredibly steep. The heavy iron ship hit the muddy floor and immediately began sliding backward down the underwater cliff. By the time it finally stopped, the bow was trapped 360 feet down and the stern had slid all the way to 490 feet deep. Completely out of reach for any tourist boat, the Queen of the Lake disappeared from sight and mostly from memory for over 60 years. That was until 1994, when a real underwater explorer named Christopher Nicholson, owner of Deep Sea Systems, deployed an ROV into Glenbrook Bay and captured the very first video footage of the SS Tahoe wreck on camera. What Nicholson filmed down there was extraordinary. The ship was sitting almost perfectly upright on that steep underwater slope, barely touched by time, and his footage gave the world its first real look at just how remarkable the lake's preserving conditions truly were. And Nicholson was not done with Tahoe. By 2003, he had drawn up plans for a far more ambitious project called Tahoe Deep Blue, a $250,000 deep-water exploration mission using a sophisticated vehicle called the Max Rover. The goal was to systematically search the lakebed for unique historical sites, not just the famous shipwreck, but anything else the lake may have quietly swallowed over the centuries. It was the kind of mission that made people genuinely nervous about what might actually turn up down there. Building on that growing interest in the wreck, two elite technical divers named Martin McClellan and Brian Morris pushed even further in 2002, attempting what many called an impossible high-altitude scuba dive to reach the ship directly. Diving at over 6,000 feet of elevation completely breaks the normal rules of decompression, because atmospheric pressure up in the mountains is so much lower than at sea level, and the human body releases nitrogen completely differently. A tiny mistake can cause air bubbles in the blood that kill instantly, and the nearest medical hyperbaric chamber was over an hour away in Reno. The team used a complex custom gas mixture of oxygen, helium, and nitrogen just to survive the descent, got only 10 minutes at the bottom, then spent over 2 grueling hours floating in near-freezing water just to safely decompress and surface. Their bravery eventually got the SS Tahoe officially listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2004. And in the years after, ROV teams from Open ROV and Mission Robotics documented the wreck further, and every single one of them found the same thing: a perfectly preserved ghost ship sitting upright in the pitch black, looking almost like it had been parked there yesterday. But the historic steamship is not the only thing the lake has preserved down in the dark. In July of 1994, a well-known Reno City planner named Donald Christopher Windecker went out for a recreational scuba dive along the underwater cliffs of Rubicon Point on the west shore. At around 100 feet deep, something went terribly wrong with his breathing equipment. He lost control and began sinking rapidly. His dive partner swam down after him, but started running dangerously low on oxygen and was forced to surface alone. Windecker never came back up. Search and rescue teams scanned the area for weeks, found absolutely nothing, and the case eventually went cold. 17 years later, on July 23, 2011, a recreational technical diver was exploring a deep rocky cliff wall at Rubicon Point when his flashlight caught something strange in a narrow stone crevice at 265 feet deep. It was a man, still wearing his full neoprene wetsuit, his weighted dive belt still buckled around his waist, and his oxygen tank still strapped tightly to his back. According to official police reports, the man looked like he had gone under the water just minutes prior. It was Donald Windecker. The El Dorado County Sheriff's Department deployed a specialized ROV equipped with a robotic claw to carefully retrieve the body, and the process took an entire day. Forensic doctors confirmed his identity using old dental records and were completely stunned by what they found. Because the water temperature at that depth stays at a permanent 35 degrees, Windecker's body had barely decomposed at all over those 17 years. The natural refrigerator of Lake Tahoe had kept him perfectly recognizable. After the operation, the Sheriff's Department was incredibly tight-lipped, when reporters started asking what this meant for other missing persons, because there are at least 4 other documented divers who have vanished in that exact same area over the years, and their bodies have never been found. The lake drops to 1,645 feet, and the vast majority of that massive pitch-black floor has never been systematically mapped or explored. So what else is sitting down there right now, preserved perfectly in the freezing cold, just waiting to be discovered? Dark legends, mafia rumors, and unexplained anomalies. The arrival of the 1950s changed the entire culture of Lake Tahoe in ways that still echo today. Massive, glitzy casinos started popping up all along the Nevada side of the shoreline. And where there are casinos, there is an unbelievable amount of cash. And where there is cash, the mob is never far behind. By the 1960s, the North Shore of Tahoe had become a hotspot mixing Hollywood glamour with organized crime, and it was the kind of place where everyday people knew better than to ask too many questions. Take Frank Sinatra. He actually owned a famous luxury casino right on the state line called the Cal Neva Lodge, where the physical border between California and Nevada ran directly through the middle of the resort's swimming pool. But in the summer of 1963, FBI agents discovered that Sam Giancana, boss of the Chicago outfit, was secretly staying in one of Sinatra's private guest chalets. Giancana was listed in the Nevada Gaming Control Board's Black Book, legally banned from setting foot inside any casino in the state. He was also suspected of personally ordering the murders of over 200 people and had been arrested more than 70 times throughout his life. Finding him at the resort caused a massive political scandal, costing Sinatra his gambling licenses and forcing him to sell the casino later that year. That is all a matter of public historical record, but it is the stories whispered behind closed doors that paint a truly chilling picture. Because of the lake's extreme depth and its scientific ability to preserve things perfectly, it naturally attracted some incredibly dark rumors. Old-timers started whispering that the local mafia was using the center of the lake as a dumping ground for people who got on their bad side. The cliché of mobsters putting someone in concrete shoes has been heard all over America, but Lake Tahoe's unique science gave that specific rumor a terrifying amount of credibility. Because the deep water is so cold, bodies that sink to the bottom almost never float back up. In a normal warm lake, a drowning victim's body will eventually generate gases during decomposition that act like a life jacket and bring it to the surface. But in Tahoe, the freezing temperature completely stops those gases from forming, and anything that goes into that deep water stays down there forever. Even Hollywood leaned into this reality. When Francis Ford Coppola was directing The Godfather Part 2, he chose to film at a stunning private estate on Tahoe's west shore called Fleur du Lac. The famous scene where Fredo Corleone is taken out to the middle of the quiet lake, shot in the back of the head, and dumped over the edge was filmed right there in real life. The screenwriters did not have to invent a spooky location because the lake's real-life reputation for swallowing secrets was already well established. To this day, local law enforcement has never officially recovered a body tied to a mafia execution from the depths of Lake Tahoe. But those unofficial stories from retired casino workers from the 40s and 50s have never truly faded away. Many claimed on their deathbeds that things happened in the dark of night out on those waters that never made it into a police file. And since a huge portion of the lake bed is completely unexplored, there is absolutely no way to prove them wrong. But if one peels back the layers of history even further, a legend emerges that is much older and much stranger than any Hollywood mob movie. Long before the casinos, the logging trucks, or the steamships, the Washoe people had detailed stories about something ancient living deep inside the water. And they were not talking about a metaphor or a fairy tale. They were talking about something physical. The Washoe spoke of the water babies, incredibly powerful, ancient spirits that lived in the deep currents right next to sacred cave rock. According to the tribal elders, these were not friendly nature spirits. They were volatile, dangerous entities that would severely harm anyone who disrespected the sacred waters or spoke carelessly about the hidden depths. When European settlers arrived in the 19th century, those native stories and pioneer legends gradually merged into a piece of local pop culture known today as Taho Tessie. The cute nickname was officially coined in the 1980s as a fun marketing nod to Scotland's Loch Ness Monster, but the actual eyewitness sightings go back more than 150 years. All the way back in 1865, a wealthy San Francisco socialite named I.C. Coggin reported encountering a massive serpent-like creature while boating on the open lake, swearing it had a flat head 14 feet wide and a dark body stretching over 600 feet through the water. In 1982, two local law enforcement officers were water skiing when they both watched a massive humped shape break through the surface right near them. In 1984, two residents of Tahoe City spotted a creature they estimated to be at least 17 feet long, covered in dark brown skin and moving heavily through the water like a whale. And then in 1985, a professional film crew setting up a shot at Zephyr Cove on the Nevada side watched something massive break the water's surface and send a nearby 18-foot boat bouncing wildly. The operators caught a large, brown, humped shape on camera for a few brief seconds, but the raw footage was allegedly confiscated and destroyed by individuals they declined to name. They never explained who took the film or why it needed to disappear. And that exact cover-up story has an incredibly uncomfortable echo when one looks back at what that research crew experienced out on Glenbrook Bay. Modern scientists have offered reasonable explanations. Dr. Charles Goldman from UC Davis has pointed out that extreme temperature shifts combined with light refraction in crystal clear water can easily create convincing optical illusions, making small things look like giant moving monsters from a distance. Massive white sturgeon, which can grow up to 12 feet long and weigh over 1,000 pounds, have been introduced into the lake over the last century, and when their rough bony backs break the surface, it can look prehistoric to an untrained eye. Strong wind patterns can also create rhythmic wave formations that trick the brain into seeing a serpent. But every once in a while, something happens that leaves even the scientists completely speechless. In 2025, a deep-sea submersible team called Deep Emerald conducted a historic live-stream dive into the center of Lake Tahoe, reaching 1,570 feet, far deeper than any living human had ever traveled inside the lake. Top researchers from UC Davis had told the team to expect a biological desert down there. But when the cameras turned on at the absolute bottom, everyone was completely shocked. The screens were filled with life. Swarms of deepwater shrimp and schools of large, healthy fish were swimming comfortably in the freezing dark, and the camera literally could not get a clear shot of the lakebed without something alive darting through the frame. Independent researcher Chase Petley put it plainly: the bottom of Lake Tahoe is absolutely not the dead, empty wasteland that science books had assumed for decades. There is a whole ecosystem thriving down there in the dark. And that brings the focus right back to that mysterious research crew at Glenbrook Bay. To this day, they have never released their full, unedited footage. The only things ever circulated online are a few blurry frames and a second or two of shaky video showing a massive dark silhouette in the water right before the screen cuts out. The shape in those leaked frames does not match the clean lines of the SS Tahoe shipwreck. It does not look like a natural rock formation, and it definitely does not look like a sturgeon. It looks like something else entirely. And the operator's immediate decision to completely cut the main electrical power to the ROV, rather than simply backing away or moving the camera, is the exact detail that keeps people up at night. Sure, there is a completely ordinary version of this story, where the crew simply panicked over a sudden equipment malfunction. Maybe they caught a glimpse of lake debris, lost their nerve, and killed the feed before thinking clearly. But then there is that other version, the version where whatever drifted into the glow of those high beams in that final second was something so genuinely unexplainable, so deeply shocking, that they decided the rest of the world was better off not seeing it. After all, Lake Tahoe is 1,645 feet deep, and the lake bed covers nearly 200 square miles. And in all the decades of ROV expeditions, technical scuba dives, advanced sonar mapping, and live-streamed sub-descents, humans have only ever seen a tiny fraction of that underwater floor. The rest of it just sits there in the silent, 39-degree darkness, perfectly still, perfectly freezing, and preserving whatever secrets have fallen into its embrace. The Queen of the Lake keeps her secrets incredibly well, and she has no intention of letting them go anytime soon. So, would you actually want to see what is down there if you had the chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.